afternoon and thank you for joining us on FutureTV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's top stories. Prime Minister Tamam Salam says Lebanon will not be defeated by the challenges it is facing, especially terrorism. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry will travel to the Middle East next week to expand a modern coalition to fight the Islamic State created by NATO and the United States. A ceasefire between government forces and pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine's east appears to be largely holding, despite accusations by both sides of minor violations of the truce. Prime Minister Tamam Salam has stressed that Lebanon will not be defeated by the challenges it is facing, especially terrorism. Speaking before a cultural delegation, Salam said resolving the tragedy of the captive soldiers and policemen is the main priority. Salam added that efforts to free them have been ongoing since day one. He highlighted the importance of Lebanese unity that will enable the people to overcome current hardships. Earlier, Salam had told reporters that efforts to free the abducted soldiers have not ceased and that the terrorist groups who abducted them only aim to trigger Sunni Shiite strife. Maronite Patriarch Bashar al-Ra'i has held talks with a Muslim-Christian delegation from the Bekaa and the North. The national news agency says the delegation handed the Patriarch a document on the need to bolster coexistence and civil peace. It also stressed the need to support the army and reject assaults against it, which are tantamount to attacks against the nation and the people. It highlighted the importance of combating Takfiri terrorism, demanding that the government assert the principles of national unity amongst the people. The NNA says this also includes electing a new president and devising a new parliamentary electoral law. The delegation comprised of families from Bekaa al-Hermel, Central Bekaa, Wadi Khalid Akkar and Bsharri met al-Ra'i at the seat of the Patriarchate in Kirki. Interior Minister Nuhad al-Mashnouk has described as excellent the meeting of the ministerial panel tasked with following up on this case of soldiers and policemen abducted by Islamist militants from Arsal. The minister is scheduled to travel to Qatar on Monday in order to follow up on the issue. Voice of Lebanon Radio said a Qatari delegation that spent 2 days in Arsal had received a list of the abductors' demands, which are taught by the release of 400 Islamist prisoners from Lebanese jails and the payment of $5 million. And coming up next, the World Health Organization identifies 2 promising vaccines that could be used to combat the ongoing Ebola outbreak. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The U.S. has announced that NATO allies have agreed to form a coalition to fight the Islamic State, with President Barack Obama stating the group's savage nihilism must be confronted. The U.S. president said his country and its key allies would mount a sustained effort to push back the group formerly known as ISIL, which he said posed a significant threat to NATO countries. There would also be efforts to include Middle Eastern nations in the coalition, a concerted effort to cut the group's funding and help those groups which reject the nihilism it has spread through Iraq and Syria. The announcement was made at the conclusion of a NATO summit in Wales after high-level talks to agree a plan by the time the UN General Assembly meets this month. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry will travel to the Middle East next week, where he expects to expand the coalition beyond Western nations. The UN Refugee Agency is conducting a massive aid operation to assist some 500,000 Iraqis displaced by conflict in northern Iraq. It includes airlifts and transport of aid by road and sea. Meet some of the families who have fled their homes, including Yasir, who carried his disabled father for 6 days from Sinjar to safety, where their family is now receiving aid and support.
These displaced Iraqis only managed to bring their family members. It was flight by foot to get from the Sinjar area to the Kurdistan region of Iraq. Some walked over 200 kilometers. Sivo, a handicapped father, arrived with his wife and 10 children. His eldest son, Yasir, carried him for 6 days. All this to escape the attacks on their village.
وعوائل برن وعذابا كمزن بيت كرن هاتنا أجيا هاتن جيا البيما هاتن هفت روجام كدنا جيادا نا خوارن بو نا آف بو تشتغن بو كرمي أسلت قرتم أبقونا خطاز بسر جيا إيه خستن.
The journey was long and dangerous, but Yasir would not give up.
هذا جوجوم دهالي جانا أبنيجي أم هاتن هزار زاروي بني البدري أبو عالم بيرو جنب ريفابون يجي النتاني مثلا نقارن يدخلين هذا أم جانا نيفيتشي ما تسهل قرن داغريان أم جانا بابي خل بشتاخد كده من نقارن استرجاعي بدن بابي مبزشوا بابي خل نيفيتشي هالموين.
Yasir carried his father to safety and found shelter, but the family desperately needed assistance that came in a massive operation to ship in 2,500 tons of aid by air, land, and sea, much of it going to those in hard-hit Duhok governorate.
These items will be distributed to the internally displaced people in Duhok. UNHCR so far could cover more than 10,000 families in many areas of Duhok, in Zaho, in Somel, and inside Duhok city. And UNHCR is trying in coming days to cover more people, to reach more people in different areas.
Recent assessments indicate there are now more than 850,000 displaced in Iraq's Kurdistan region. Distributions are ongoing to ensure that all those in need are reached. Aid from UNHCR and its partners has been a lifeline, says Sivo.
شغاتنا بدري تشتاق منانيبو حتى بدراف منانيبو تشتكي منابو البيرا لشنا المتحدة هات أف ضدو شك دانا ما نهزارون مني فيجي القادد نفن وحتى أفناني بونجي أم القادر نفستنا بالجينا تشتاق نبو ما تشتاق ناني بو أم بس وان أفدانا ما أم جد ممنونين حتى نكي أف بس داينما.
Sivo misses his garden in Sinjar, the smell of the grass and the shade under trees where he used to spend time with his children. But for now, he's just glad that all his family survived and no one was left behind. That's why they're still able to smile.
Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has blamed widespread power outages in recent days on years of lack of investment, warning people were trying to cripple his government's efforts to rebuild the country. In a televised address, al-Sisi said the outages were the most significant incident over the last 3 decades, adding that the country needs to invest at least $12 billion over the next 5 years to generate sufficient amount of electricity for its population. On Thursday, a huge power outage blacked out most of Cairo, causing major disruption across the capital city of some 20 million people at the height of the morning rush hour. The power disruption also left parts of the capital without running water and hit telecommunications, knocking out 2,000 mobile phone signal boosters. A ceasefire between government forces and pro-Ukraine separatists in Ukraine's east appears to be largely holding, despite accusations by both sides of minor violations of the truce. A Ukraine defense official accused rebels in Donetsk of a series of provocations after the truce went into effect on Friday. Ukraine and pro-Russian rebels have signed a ceasefire deal aimed at ending nearly 5 months of fighting in the country's east. Ukraine's President Petro Poroshenko had ordered government forces to cease fire following an agreement signed at talks attended by representatives of Ukraine, Russia, the rebels, and the OSCE in Minsk, Belarus. The negotiations followed talks between Poroshenko and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in Minsk last week. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon hailed the signing of the ceasefire and urged related parties to work towards an effective implementation. He also called on the international community to support the agreement. And now for some news around the world. In brief, dozens have been killed in fierce overnight clashes between army-backed Yemeni tribes and Shiite Houthi rebels, pressing a protest campaign against the government. Tribal sources say fighting raged in Jauf province, north of Sana'a, as rebels sought to seize routes to the capital, where their supporters have staged weeks of escalating protests against the central government. Flash floods triggered by heavy downpours in India's northern state of Jammu and Kashmir have created havoc, as authorities closed 4 bridges connecting the 2 parts of Jammu city after they suffered severe damage. Authorities have declared a disaster alert after 2 days of heavy rain hit villages across the state, causing the worst flooding in 2 decades. At least 5 people have been injured, one seriously, when severe storms swept through Detroit, Michigan last night. The storms left some 400,000 people across the state without electricity, and officials say it may take several days before all the power is back on. Moving on to Africa, Sierra Leone has announced it will impose a 4-day countrywide lockdown in an escalation of efforts to halt the spread of Ebola across West African nations. Reports say citizens will not be allowed to leave their homes between September 18th and September 21st in a bid to prevent the disease from spreading further and to allow health workers to identify cases in the early stages of the illness. A research team from South Africa has also established a mobile lab in Sierra Leone's capital, Freetown, that will drastically reduce the time taken to diagnose cases of the Ebola virus disease. The lab, which has been in operation for about a week, can confirm whether a person has Ebola in just a matter of hours, a process that previously took days. On another note, the World Health Organization has agreed to use blood therapy and serums made from survivors' blood to fight the spread of the virus and identify 2 promising vaccines that could be used to combat the ongoing outbreak.
We agreed that whole blood therapies and convalescent serum may be used to treat Ebola virus disease, and that all efforts must be invested into helping affected countries use them safely. 2 promising vaccine candidates were identified. One is called chimpanzee adenovirus Ebola, and the other one VSV Ebola. Safety studies are currently underway in the United States of America and soon to start in Europe and Africa. We are aware of a drug which has been developed in China. We have reviewed, and the experts have reviewed, the data which is currently available in this drug. This is a drug which is potentially promising. There is not enough convincing data in an animal model, and in particular in the primate, in the monkey models, but we know that there should be results of this molecule in monkey models in the weeks to come. So as soon as this data is available, we will review it, the expert will review it, and this will indicate to which level this molecule is a priority or not. Medication will not be available to treat everybody, but also we must remember that supportive treatment works. We have in some places without treatment that can go to 90%. In the good treatment center, which are well managed and where people get supportive care, this drops to 25%. So this is what needs to be done now as soon as possible. This is what will have the biggest impact on the affected people, will be treatment and care.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Prime Minister Tamam Salam says Lebanon will not be defeated by the challenges it is facing, especially terrorism. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry will travel to the Middle East next week to expand a modern coalition to fight the Islamic State created by NATO and the United States. A ceasefire between government forces and pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine's east appears to be largely holding, despite accusations by both sides of minor violations of the truce. Those are your top stories for today. I'm Linda Tamim, wishing you all a very nice weekend.